happy hour. If I could remind everybody to mute your phones, and as Amanda said, we are recording this call. First up, I'd like to introduce Sean Williams. He's the president of Fortis Mortgage, is a husband and a father with over 15 years of mortgage experience. He has overseen more than $2.5 billion in mortgage loans and has helped thousands of families fulfill their homeownership dreams. Sean?
I apologize. I'm muted. I said good afternoon, or it's evening at this point, I think, right? So everybody raise their glass and we can toast. I got some cool water here, so that's what I'm drinking for happy hour today.
Cheers.
Cheers, cheers, cheers. So what we'll try to do, the goal is to get some interaction too today, like in regards to questions and things like that. So we'll go ahead and just ask everybody, obviously, to keep your phones muted and such. But if you have any questions or any comments or anything like that that you want to leave, be sure to put that in the chat. I think that's good information, and we'll lend for some dialogue at the end with the Q&A. All right, so what I'd like to do is now I'm going to introduce Colleen Palmer. I'll read her bio here. And Colleen's been in the mortgage industry for 32 years. 35, I think it said now. All right. You were 3 years old, and currently serve as the Maryland and Virginia territory for Caliber Home Loans. In addition to the high-tech pipeline management, common sense underwriting, competitive pricing that Caliber provides, she provides product education and marketing materials to help to grow the business and set us apart from the competition. All right. So I wanted to, like I said, introduce Colleen. She's our past president as well, previous past president of MMBBA. She's a membership committee co-chair and the, like I said, the area sales manager for Caliber Home Loans. So there you are, Colleen.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I think I got you my wrong bio, but that all works because everything is correct. It just wasn't the one that I think that was my LinkedIn, but
yeah, it was your LinkedIn. Let me try it again. Here we go.
No, you're good. You're good. You don't have to do that. It's not necessary. We're good. I don't need all that fanfare. I'm old. We all figured that part out. 35 years in the business pretty much surmises that. But anyway, good evening to everybody. And thank you all for being on here. I wanted to thank Sean for agreeing to do this. We've had Sean do a few events for us, and he's just got a swag. So we kind of like to utilize him for that. We have Tim that'll speak a little bit later on legislative, which I appreciate your time, Tim, tonight. Of course, we'll have Bob in a little bit after that, and that should be interesting. Bob is a wealth of knowledge, and obviously he's got his nose to the grindstone, being in the hub of MBA, and so hopefully he'll give us some insight that maybe we will find something interesting about our industry that we may or may not know at the very moment. And of course, I want to thank Amanda for always putting these together and managing them and giving us her time, and Frank for the introductory, and all of you all for participating. The people that are already members, I thank you all so much for your support this past year and a half at this point. It's been hard, obviously I was president during most of that. I see a lot of these faces. I look, for some reason, I see Sarah right now, and I think a lot of us on the board have really had our hands tied with not being able to utilize our talents to give to you the things that we love to do, which is in-person events and in-person education, social, and things of that nature. So this is kind of the best we've been able to do thus far, and this is a pretty good crowd. So I just want to thank everybody for supporting us during this time. It really is appreciated. We definitely need it, and we're much looking forward to Mark and future events where we'll be able to see each other in person and kind of get back to where we were before, hopefully in the near future. And the people that aren't a current member, I just kind of want to take this opportunity to ask you to kind of reach out to us if you don't know, what we're about, and just see if this might be something that you not just maybe want to be a member, but maybe even just want to get involved. Every person with any involvement, whether it's little or big, is definitely a help to us, and it helps the ones of us that are kind of the ones that do a lot of the labor. It's really appreciated because we need new faces. We need, and I'm going to say we need youth, but that doesn't mean if you're past 29 like me, you can't. We don't need you as well. So please stay looking at your emails, we've really tried to reduce the reach outs to you so you don't feel inundated with information from MMBBA. Amanda is relatively new with us, and she's brought a lot of cool things to MMBBA. And I think you'll see we send out a weekly newsletter that should give you all your information so you're not being inundated every day with information, because we know there's a lot of spam. And so please look at those, because there's a lot of events and things that may interest you. And you'll hear about some of those today. So that's all I have.
Thanks, Colleen. If anybody's out there and you're new to MMBBA, do me a favor and put a 1 in the chat. If you could do that, you're new to MMBBA. And then also, if you're not a member, it'd be good to know who's out there that aren't members. So just put a easy 1 inside the chat for us there. So next up, we're going to have Tim Goff, and he's going to talk about the legislative update for us. And so I'm just going to introduce Tim by just reading his bio as well. Tim is the CEO of Bay Capital Mortgage, and they're headquartered in Annapolis, Maryland. They were established in 1994. And so Tim's company, Bay Capital, they're independent mortgage banking company that's licensed in Maryland, Virginia, DC, Delaware, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. So prior to Tim with Bay Capital, he was the senior vice president and area manager of First Mariner Mortgage, which is a division of First Mariner Bank. And their offices were located in Annapolis, Maryland. Tim's got 3 decades of mortgage banking experience with nationally recognized company. He was previously served as the president of First Republic Mortgage Corporation, an independently owned mortgage banking company that First Mariner acquired back in 2008. All right, so Tim's also got a CMB, which is a master certified mortgage banker designation from the Mortgage Bankers Association of America. Congrats on that. That's a big accomplishment. And it's the highest certification awarded to any member of the industry. So after earning his BA in economics at the University of Maryland in 1983, Tim moved to Annapolis, where he currently resides with his wife, Lori, where they raised 3 children. So, Tim, I'll turn it over to you, and you can tell us the legislative update. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Appreciate it. Unfortunately, when you told them that I graduated in 1983, I can't say that I'm 29. But I have been doing this. I'm in my 3rd decade, or actually I'm in my 4th decade. And, being part of the MMBBA, really, it challenges you, but it also really puts you in the middle of what's going on in our industry. So I'm very excited to be a part of the MMBBA. And last year, along with Rich Green, I know he's on the call here, we're both co-chairs of the legislative committee. We had an interesting session here in 2021 with the COVID protocols. The Maryland Constitution says that the legislators must vote on bills in person. So that kind of complicated how they were going to handle this COVID pandemic with respect to the session. The difficult part, talking to our lobbyist, Dennis Rasmussen, the difficult part was really being able to get in front of the legislators and talk about bills that affected our industry and what our take was and our suggestions and our feedback. Dennis was phenomenal. He did it all basically by cell phone and Zoom call because he couldn't get in front of them one-on-one. And we actually had a very successful session. Give you a couple quick stats. There were actually 2,324 bills introduced, which, believe it or not, is a low number for a typical session. There were 817 bills passed by both chambers. We actually reviewed about 60 bills. Dennis, our lobbyist Dennis, takes the time to look at every single bill that comes through the legislature and identifies what he thinks may have something to do with mortgage banking, puts it in front of the legislative committee. Rich Green and I, along with others, kind of review the bills, get people's take on it, and then we decide how do we want to approach the legislature with our lobbying efforts of what we think makes sense for the MBA. Of those, we identified about 60 bills that we thought may affect us. and we took position on about 20 bills. Nothing passed that we felt would be detrimental to the mortgage business, which was a win. I do want to take a minute and just highlight a couple of bills to give you an idea and a flavor of what the MMBBA is doing on your behalf to represent you down in Annapolis. We'll start. HB 943 was a Anne Arundel County transfer tax increase. Originally, we weren't going to take a position on this, but the Maryland Association, or excuse me, the Anne Arundel County Association of Realtors approached us. So we did work with them to try to prevent this transfer tax increase from going through. Unfortunately, it did pass. It's on the governor's desk to be signed into law, and essentially it gives Anne Arundel County the ability to raise transfer tax on properties in excess of $1 million. The funds that will be created from this increase in transfer tax will go to fund a housing trust special revenue fund, basically for Anne Arundel County residents who are having trouble making their mortgage payment. So that's what it's for. It was something that we didn't think was a popular bill, but at the same time, we didn't feel that it was completely our fight. House Bill 943 was another bill that didn't get through that we actually supported. It was the Community Development Administration, CDA, is trying to institute a program that's called Live Near Your School program. And basically, it would be MMP funds for housing for folks that are in college or going to school or getting their master's to be able to buy homes in the area where they're going to school. So that didn't make it out of committee. There was one bill, House Bill 960, which could have been very detrimental to the mortgage business. Fortunately, it didn't get out of committee. And what the bill said is that a landlord could not require a tenant to sign an estoppel agreement in a lease agreement. Basically, an estoppel certificate gives the information that the lender can get from the tenant regarding the rent roll, how much they're paying, how good of a landlord is this landlord, are you happy with the support you're getting from this landlord? And for those in commercial financing, if you're looking to refinance a commercial mortgages, these estoppel certificates are very important to the commercial lender. Well, this bill, if it would have passed, would have said that you could not require the tenant to sign an estoppel certificate to get that information. So we were able to head that off. We gave unfavorable testimony, as did the realtors, and it failed to get out of committee. So that was a win for sure. And then two other bills. HB 1218 was, excuse me, not 1218, 1370 was a fairly draconian bill. It basically took the federal COVID-19 pandemic response of giving 6-month forbearance and then extending another 6 month, and basically would have extended that kind of a rule to any state of emergency that ever came up in the future. Automatically, that kind of relief could have been extended. So that would have been, we thought, detrimental to lenders that are lending in Maryland. Fortunately, it did not get out of conference. Therefore, it didn't make it even to a vote at that point. Last bill I'll touch on. We worked directly with the National Reverse Mortgage Lenders Association on Senate Bill 457, which is basically amendment to current Maryland law regarding reverse mortgage. The Cliff Notes is, in Maryland, in 2010, a bill was passed that only allows essentially HUD, home equity conversion mortgages, HUD HECM mortgages. And there's a couple of limitations there that are not in a standard reverse mortgage loan. A couple things. Number one, you're capped at the FHA loan limit on a HUD HECM. You're limited to 62 years of age, minimum 62 years of age. Obviously, you have FHA condo approval process that can become difficult at times. I lost my last point there. In any event, this bill would have opened up more types of reverse mortgages in Maryland. 60 years old was part of this new law. You could have been 60 years old to use a reverse mortgage. The fourth one was the HUD-HECM does not allow you to take 100% of the proceeds of a reverse mortgage up front. 10% have to be reserved to be paid no sooner than after 12 months after the reverse mortgage is in place. So these were kind of things that limit reverse mortgage lending in Maryland, and we were working with the National Reverse Mortgage Lenders Association to try to get that bill amended. We couldn't get it out of committee. It just didn't become a priority to both House Economic Matters or to the Senate Finance Committee. So we've got that on the agenda to work for next session. We're going to work with some legislators throughout the summer, try to get them on board so that we can have a jump start for next year's session. Rich, I know you're on the call here. Did you have anything else you'd like to add regarding this session and some of the things that we dealt with? You're on mute, Rich.
You covered it really well, Tim. It was a really good year, and it really takes an army of people beyond Tim and myself to really get the work done and the message, and we'll hope that we'll be able to engage many more folks next year for the session, because I think it's going to be very active given what this year was all about. Tim, I don't have any of my notes in front of me, but I know there was that one other bill about the creditworthiness.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Thank you for
Yep.
reminding me. It's HB 1213. There was a bill.
Stand up.
Do you want to talk about that, Rich?
My memory is a little
Okay.
off right now, but it basically they were looking to put in a bill that required a lender to look at alternative items in making a credit decision, which were really outside of most of them were outside of what we do.
To include school attendance and school GPA.
Right.
And it would have been difficult, for us to deal with that. We were able to work with the legislature to get that bill amended so that it can be considered, but it's not required to be a benchmark in approving a mortgage.
Yeah, we worked with the Maryland bankers on that, and we worked with other groups to issue an amendment that was palatable.
Right.
It would have been real serious. I mean, we already do some of the things, but it was totally against beyond what agency would look to for us in making lending decisions. So that was a big one.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. I see Bob's on the call, so we'll go ahead and send it back to Sean. And thanks for your time, folks.
Hey, Tim, thanks a lot for that. Really appreciate it. So listen, to take a quick break and everybody grab a sip of their drink because this is a happy hour. And then we're going to get into Bob, and he's going to talk about the industry. I know we've all been kind of wanting to hear his take on it and the MBA's take, and I'm very excited to hear that. So if everybody's still with us and you're having a good time, I'd like to have interaction in the chat. So put another one in there, exclamation point, something. Let us know that you're still here and you're active and listening. Nice, nice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Bob by reading his bio online. So Robert Brooksmith.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to just tell you, you can't read the whole darn thing. You got to truncate it.
I promise you that I'm not going to read the whole
Okay.
thing. Yeah. I actually, before we got started, Bob, I sent a message and I'm like, can I do like the abbreviated one? So what and I'm sure you're going to introduce yourself too as well and tell us some of your background, and it's easy to find you online. And so I was looking for some fun facts, but I couldn't find very much about fun facts and such, but I have some information on you. And so, Bob, it's, thanks again. And you were appointed prior to joining the MBA in 2018. Bob served as president and chief operating officer at Trilliant, heading the firm's mortgage litigation support practice and serving diverse financial services clientele, including large banks, independent mortgage lenders, community banks, credit unions, and service providers. So I'm going to skip down, and some of the things that I pull from here, Bob, that are impressive to me is overseeing annual originations of $9 billion and a balance sheet of $10 billion in residential mortgages, which makes you very well qualified to sit in the seat that you're in right now, and a servicing portfolio of $20 billion. Bob has served as the chairman of the Mortgage Bankers Association and Residential Board of Governors, and as a member of the board of directors. Firms under his leadership have garnered multiple awards and servicing operations excellence, including Freddie Mac's Tier 1 and Hall of Fame designations. Bob, you were also a CMB, and you graduated from Yale University. And so one thing I wanted to read that I took out again while searching for fun facts. So it says there was a quote that you had that would often obviously resonate with what we're doing today. I took the leadership job as an industry practitioner. It was helpful to see how all the aspects of my career were interrelated in this position, said Brooke Smith, who has headed the organization since 2018. It was easier to relate and empathize with our members because I've sat in their seat. I feel like it was a good preparation to be in this job where all of our members are facing challenges that I've faced in the past. So with that said, I'm going to, give a big round of applause for Bob Brooksmith. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And right on cue, here comes an ambulance down M Street. So sorry about the noise. It's great to be with you all today. I want to add that the $20 billion in loans being serviced were all serviced in the great state of Maryland from Laurel, Maryland, when Chevy Chase Bank was still independent. Of course, Capital One bought Chevy Chase in 2009, and I left there in 2010. And I suppose those loans have fled to Texas, like a lot of things, but very proud to be a Maryland resident since 1989, and to have worked in Bethesda at Chevy Chase Bank for 14 years. And now I have about a 5-mile commute from Chevy Chase to downtown DC, which, by the way, one side benefit of the pandemic, the commute's a lot better. But thanks for having me. And I'm gonna tee up a few items, talk to you briefly about them, and then try to leave a fair bit of time for your questions, because I find that sometimes I think I know what you might want to talk about, but rather than blather on and guess, I'll let you ask me some questions. So I want to start with, clearly we've gone from the brink of disaster. I mean, I can't believe it was just a year ago, or already, I suppose, a year ago, that we were begging the Fed to step in and buy mortgage-backed securities, or there would be no mortgage market that Monday, last week of March last year. It was crazy. I have a stack of, I don't have the neatest desk ever anyway, but I have a stack that I'm never gonna, well, maybe not never, that I'm reluctant to do anything with, because it's my pandemic stack. And it's all the stuff that we were going through, from how does the mortgage market continue when county courthouses are closed and nobody can get a mortgage recorded. People were worried about the validity of title coverage from the time a loan closed to the time it recorded. And who in the world wants an appraiser traipsing through his or her house in the middle of a pandemic? And how do you get a property evaluated? In fact, I just did a panel at our spring conference with a couple of senior people at Fannie and Freddie, and we were on the phone every Tuesday and Thursday for several weeks as we played this game of whack-a-mole, as it just seemed like our business was going to, or at least it had the risk of really having a really serious dislocation. And then, of course, after the Fed came in and started buying mortgages, they bought them at such a clip that rates plummeted so fast that then the next crisis was our mortgage bankers were being hit with these margin calls that were threatening their solvency. And this was a crazy situation where you all had lots of profits locked into your pipeline, but the margin call was due tomorrow morning and the profits didn't come until you closed and sold the loan. So that was another real crisis where I was getting calls and emails from members saying, well, I'm choosing between making payroll and making my margin call. And it was just a really tense and fraught time. But as you all know, it all had a a happy ending in terms of the largest origination in history. We've just barely beat 2003 at just over $3.8 trillion. And the margins have been the juiciest they've been in a very long time. I know they're already coming in from there, but they had nowhere to go but in, given that they were just tremendous. So we went in a real roller coaster year from the brink of disaster to just a year that I don't know that any of us could have thought we'd ever see in our careers. So that's the good news. The bad news is that there's a new sheriff in town, or group of sheriffs, and I think we're going to see what people warned us that we would see if the CFPB had the structure of a single director versus a commission of some kind, like the FDIC and other federal regulatory bodies have. We went, as you know, from Cordray to Mick Mulvaney. That was kind of a wild period, and you can't imagine two more opposite points of view on the Bureau than what Cordray had versus Mulvaney, who, as you know, wanted to abolish the whole thing. And then we had what I consider a very sensible and moderate Bureau under Kathy Kraninger. No, it was not stopping its enforcement. They continued to do plenty of enforcement, but they did it in a really sensible way, and in a way where their ethos was, we'll let you know what the rules are and then you better follow them, which all our members are happy to have a situation like that, because of course we want to protect the consumer. We just want to be able to do business and not fear crazy regulatory or legal risks as a result of good faith efforts to make mortgages for people in this country. And now under Acting Director Weggio and proposed Director Chopra, we're going to get, I think, a pretty significant snapback. So think about the pendulum. It's not rattling around the middle. It's going way to the other side again. And although there are a couple of things that I would be somewhat reassuring about, I know you all have seen the proposal from the Bureau that, without using the word moratorium, makes it sound like they don't want anybody to foreclose until 2022. Well, it was pretty significant that in the documents surrounding that proposal, they asked for comments about exceptions and ways forward for times when the servicer has established with the borrower that there's really not a way forward. And I think that's really important. We have until May 11th to comment on this. And any of you who are interested in this, feel free to get in touch with us here at MBA to weigh in on the comments or file your own. But we think the Bureau is very open to situations where borrowers have been in touch with their servicers. The servicers have made a good faith effort to go through all of the various options available to them as it relates to loss mitigation. And the borrower either says, you know what, I've given up on this place. I don't even want it. You know, I'm done. You can have it. In that case, we obviously, at least in my mind, ought to be able to foreclose. In cases where the house is vacant or abandoned, putting off the inevitable just blights the neighborhood and increases the loss for the lender. At a time when home inventories are so low, we obviously could use some more inventory. Now, obviously that's a side effect of foreclosure, but I don't think we can ignore it. If you've got a home that's not in productive use, let's get it back into productive use. And then the third category would be people where the lender or the servicer's gone through all these options and the borrower simply doesn't qualify for any of them. Now, we got in this latest legislation $10 billion in homeowner assistance funds, which we're really excited about, and we're working with Treasury, who distributes the money to the states generally through the state housing finance agencies, to try to get them to have as uniform as possible a program that servicers can implement easily, that perhaps would help for borrowers who are back at work but whose income is not what it used to be. So you get to the bottom of the waterfall, you go through a modification and you just can't get it to pencil out. Well, maybe if they reduce the principal a little by using some of this $10 billion in funding, then you could get the mod to work. So we're working on what we think are practical and creative solutions for sustained home ownership for people who still want their home and have income. But there will be some who have zero income. And I don't care what kind of funky math you put through. If the income is zero, you can't afford a payment, and therefore you can't make a mod work. So for borrowers like that, where we've gone through all the options and there simply is no alternative, we also think we ought to be able to continue down the path to foreclosure. So the good news is that very, very small percentage of loans are underwater now. We're at a record level of home equity in this country, and home values keep rising due to the shortage I just mentioned in inventory. So there will be a lot of cases where the borrower can get out clean, not have any judgments or forgiven debt or any of that kind of thing, and get on with his or her life. So we're going to be urging the Bureau not to do anything that even remotely looks like a blanket moratorium. And then I guess the last category I'll briefly touch on are people who the servicer has not been able to contact. And we think that we can put together some proposal that says, you know, we tried really, really hard, not just some cursory, well, I called a couple times and they didn't call me back, but something where we've really made every effort through door knocking and everything else to get in touch with someone. And if they're completely non-responsive, you know, I think the servicer ought to be able to proceed with a foreclosure. And by the way, sending a foreclosure notice is sometimes the jolt the borrower needs to get in touch with the servicer. So anyway, that's enough on that. But the Bureau clearly is very focused on this, and our servicers need to be really prepared to do this process as flawlessly as they can. The second thing I know is on some people's minds, and rightfully so, are the amendments to the PSPA between FHFA and Treasury that relate to Fannie and Freddie's purchase of second homes and investor properties. There are a couple of other amendments related to cash window maximums and layered risk loans, but the one that's really important in the short term is the 7% limit on purchases for second homes and investors. When Treasury put out the press release, it said it was designed to keep levels at current production. Well, the trouble is they were using old data, and the market, it turns out, in January when they put this thing out, was actually producing 10 or 11% second homes and investors. So we've been very active with FHFA and with Treasury to say, look, we understand why Fannie and Freddie probably shouldn't buy more second and investor properties as a proportion of the volume than the market produces, but they ought to be able to at least buy what the market's producing. And so why don't you give them some time to get to this 7% level, like the end of the year? Because otherwise, as a lot of you know, you've got loans in your pipelines that are locked in, and you're not going to be able to deliver them to Fannie or Freddie if you're over your limit with them. So we've been pressing hard on this. We had Director Calabria interviewed live at our conference on Tuesday. Frankly, he was not very, it doesn't seem like he's going to do anything about this. And he kind of foisted off on Treasury and says, well, these were things Treasury required to let us continue building capital at Fannie and Freddie by raising the level of the, continuing the suspension of the net worth sweep and letting the capital levels rise. But the farce here is that second homes and investor properties with their loan level price adjustments actually have a higher risk adjusted rate of return on capital than the primary residents do. So by limiting your purchase of that, you're actually decreasing your ability to raise capital. So it's one of these maddening situations where Calabria is pointing one way. We talked to Treasury. They're like, well, that was the last group. We're just sort of learning what's, where the light switches are. And so, but we haven't given up. We're working closely with other trades too. There's an important meeting Monday on this. And we had the new Deputy Director of the National Economic Council at the White House at our conference this morning. I interviewed, that's why I'm all dialed up. I interviewed him live today, and we pressed him on this too, because he can be very influential. So anyway, to make a long story short, we are pushing for, in the short run, having Fannie and Freddie have the flexibility to have more time to get to this level. And in the long run, we're pushing to renegotiate this plus the layered risk limit plus the $1.5 billion cash window cap that goes into effect in January. So I've already spoken longer than I meant to. I would like to open it up for questions, and perhaps if there are things in the chat, if you can call them out for me and tell me what you'd like to talk about. I'm happy to talk about anything you'd like.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much. How much time do we have, Bob, for Q&A? You think?
I'd say 20 minutes.
Okay. Thanks so much. You've addressed the first question about the limiting lenders' delivery of investments in second home properties. And so a question I was going to ask on that you also addressed is where you're going to keep putting the pressure on, and it sounds like you are. So
yeah, right. One other thing I should say about the pressure, and it's a delicate balance when you're in my seat of how much you do behind the scenes and quietly, and how much you start flapping your arms and using the media and the Congress. So we did the first thing quietly and respectfully, and we let everybody know what we're doing. We told FHFA we were going to talk to Treasury. We told Treasury we were going to talk to FHFA. It felt like Henry Kissinger on a shuttle diplomacy mission. And then after a while, we said, well, to hell with you. If you're not going to move on this, we're going to activate the Mortgage Action Alliance, which is, I hope you all know, I hope you're all members of, is a free network that lets you do grassroots advocacy with your elected representatives. And in fact, speaking of Tim's earlier report on advocacy, we've actually used this successfully at the state level in Annapolis as well. But right now we're talking about the federal level. So we've already gotten more than 20,000 letters to representatives and senators on this issue. And of course, the trouble is that the Congress has no authority here, right? All they can do is urge Calabria and urge Yellen to fix this problem. I've met, we're starting to go back to some in-person meetings in Washington. I met in person with an influential member of House Financial Services Committee, and he agreed to call Calabria, he's a Republican, call Calabria, and also to call the NEC. We've got other members who have good relationships with their Democratic representatives, including Sherrod Brown, who's the head of the Senate Banking Committee, who they're going to weigh in with Treasury on the Democratic side. So we're really trying to make a bigger stink about this, having been unsuccessful in getting action a little more behind the scenes. Thanks
for that. So everyone in the audience, just for the sake of coordination, so that everyone won't blur it out on Zoom, if you can put your questions in the chat, and then those that have questions, I'm actually going to ask you to unmute yourself and ask that question if you'd like, or I can just read the question. But there's one question in the chat from Frank. So Frank, if you wanted to unmute yourself and ask the question, that's fine, or I could just I could ask.
You're muted, Frank.
Frank, you're muted. All right, so I'm gonna. Oh, there he is.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sure. So I saw a report yesterday on one of the news sources that suggested that home sales or home values are up over 17% over the past 12 months. Does the MBA feel that we can sustain these increases in sales and values, or do you feel we're building a bubble around ourselves?
Yeah. Hey, Frank. The latest number I've seen is 10.9%. I know there's different measures. I think that's probably only on the conforming side, but still, yeah. I mean, anytime home price values increase faster than incomes is problematic, right? Because you are freezing more and more people out of getting their foot on the first rung of the ladder of home ownership, and that's a real concern. That's where supply is the tightest. That's where prices are going up the fastest. And it's where there's fierce competition from buyers who don't plan to live there, right? I mean, there's single family rentals, they're all cash offers. And I'm sure we could spend the rest of this time telling stories about the nutty things you're seeing in your own neighborhood as it relates to houses flying off the shelf. So we do not think that's sustainable, and we have been urging, and in fact, there's an impulse when a new administration comes in, particularly one of another party, is to think that anything the last guy did was poison, right? Well, the Trump administration actually spent about a year putting together a plan about how to reduce barriers to building affordable homes and to increase the supply. And we've been urging, in fact, we started with the transition teams, say, look, just because it says Trump on it, don't throw it in the trash. There's a lot of good work in there. So we think that some of the things that the federal government is doing, understanding that a lot of the roadblocks to new home construction are at the state and local county level, that the federal government will be providing incentives to the localities to try to get more supply on the market. And we are seeing builders increase their building, but then, they get smacked by the highest lumber prices in a lifetime. And we've still got tariffs on Canadian lumber, and it's hard to get qualified labor. I mean, we work with the National Association of Home Builders. I'm really proud of them. They have a great program that gets people coming out of prison to learn trades. And so the labor issue is acute. And it also gets into immigration, which again, we don't want to, that's sort of a third rail, I guess, but it's all related. So the short answer to your question, Frank, is that home prices can't keep going up this fast. We need to get more supply, and the demographics are going to be a tailwind to home prices, meaning there are more and more people entering their prime home buying years. So we've got to get the supply up.
Right. Thanks for that. See, there was one other question. All right. So interested in the MBA position relative to the QM patch set to expire. Can you address that, Bob?
Yeah, this is another source of annoyance. MBA worked for 2 years through an exhaustive rulemaking process through the Administrative Procedures Act. When you do a rulemaking, you can either issue an advanced notice of proposed rulemaking, or you can go straight to a notice of proposed rulemaking. This was a big deal, the QM rule. So Kathy Kraninger's CFPB did it the slow, deliberate way, issued an advanced notice of proposed rulemaking, is subject to a long comment period, and then after a year or whatever it took, to a notice of proposed rulemaking. And we spent 2 years on this, and we got together with the advocates, the civil rights groups, the affordable housing advocates, and we all came up with the same solution. You can't have a single credit factor determine QM eligibility, that 43 DTI. It never made sense, and it makes much less sense now than it did when it was promulgated. So, and you can't have a static guideline in statute that says, here's what a QM is, because circumstances change all the time. So we based this on data, said, look, if you're at about 150 over APOR, your performance is pretty darn good. And you all know that pricing includes any number of risk factors, right? It could be occupancy, it could be LTV, it could be DTI, it could be credit score, it could be all this stuff. So it turns out pricing is a pretty good proxy for a loan where a borrower has the ability to repay it and should be considered qualified. So we said, go to a pricing construct, keep in all the Dodd-Frank prohibitions against interest-only loans, neg-am loans, 40-year terms, prepayment penalties, all those things that are good consumer protectors, but switch from this crazy 43 DTI and then the dreaded Appendix Q for how you figure the income, and go to the price thing. So that's exactly what Kathy's bureau did, put out a final rule. But the trouble is, because of course we all need some time to implement things, the mandatory implementation date wasn't until July 1, which is 6 months into the term of President Biden. So the new regime, and mind you, it's still an acting regime, said, all right, well, we're going to delay the final implementation date beyond July 1st. And we're going to do this to give the new director optionality. Well, you can't really go through a 2-year Administrative Procedures Act and then say, oh, never mind, there's a new director, we're gonna throw the whole thing into chaos. Well, that's what they've proposed. We've sent comments, again, with some of these other groups that we joined with before, saying there's no need to delay this. Everybody's ready for it. It actually expands credit availability. And PS, and this gets really in the weeds, but PS, the PSPA amendments basically limit Fannie and Freddie to buying QMs that follow the new definition. So it's not even gonna cover any loans that if they keep the old definition through another year and a half or whatever they propose. So this is frustrating. There's question about whether the Bureau even has the ability to do this. We'll see what they do once they go through the comments on this. But unless the PSPAs change again, it's going to have no practical effect for Fannie and Freddie loans because they're only going to be able to buy loans that are QMs based on the new rule. So probably more background and information than you wanted, but we think we got it right. Nobody has come up with anything remotely like a better idea. And I say that not to be bratty, but just because a lot of people have thought about this and tried. And this is the solution that people from all across the spectrum have agreed on.
Thanks again. So I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. You have a question, Chris Kuzak, I see you're off mute. I'm not sure if you have a question, sir. But
It's not really, I mean, maybe it's a question, but there was an article written in Housing Wire recently that claimed that the mortgage industry isn't alarmed by FHFA's actions. And I would be interested in your opinion. Bob, you talk with hundreds of people, a week at least. And I kind of read it and head scratch. I don't know if the headline was salacious to get clicks or just interested. I see you laughing, obviously. I'll just pause there and let your laughs turn into words, I guess.
Well, I'm coming up on my 3-year anniversary here, and my predecessor still likes to stir the pot. So that's who wrote that, as I'm sure you know. And yeah, I mean, it's nonsense. It's easy when one is consulting and doesn't have how shall I say this, doesn't have a responsibility to the industry to just start launching bombs and clickbait and all that stuff. Of course, the industry is tremendously concerned about Calabria and what he's done at the Bureau, and we're all dearly hoping to get a Supreme Court decision any minute that says he's out of here, right? Meanwhile, when he's in the seat, we got to have a relationship with him that helps steer things in the right direction. And as you all know, I think, I expended tremendous political capital when I thought it was a really big problem. When he came out with that idiotic adverse market refinance fee with 2 weeks notice at a time when your pipelines were probably the biggest they'd ever been, and you were exposed for 6 weeks of pipeline, I went apeshit. I went to every media outlet. We even had the White House rebuke its own FHFA director. I mean, that was a pretty good trick. So when we need to do stuff that's, and publicly, that yes, hurt our relationship with the FHFA, but at that point it's like, well, who cares? If they're gonna do crazy shit like this, we can't just let them do it. So, and the other thing I would mention is that when I started and in 2018, and then Calabria was nominated a little later, there was real concern, given his writings at Cato and other places, that he was just going to dismantle the GSEs. He saw no need for federal involvement in housing, and certainly didn't think the GSEs should be doing crazy stuff like cash out refis. Well, when's the last time you heard, people are always worried about him shrinking the GSE footprint. When's the last time you heard him say that a cash out refi shouldn't be done by the GSEs? Once he got in the seat and he looked at the statistics of Fannie and Freddie, and they showed him what the risk adjusted return was on a cash out refi compared to other loans, he realized that's where they make a lot of money, and they have to do the mission critical, duty to serve, affordable housing kind of loans. They're much less profitable than a good cash out refi. So I think we've actually done extremely well on not having the GSEs shrink their footprint. And yes, there are skirmishes. And should they be buying 7% of seconds and investors or 10%? Well, that's tinkering around the edges compared to what we feared, which is, you can get a government guaranteed loan once as a purchase, but if you want to refi it, you're on your own in the private market. I mean, that's some of the stuff we were up against. So anyway, thanks for provoking me, Chris. But there you have it.
I wasn't a provocation. But I'm sure others had read the article, and I feel as you do. So maybe it was a tease, but certainly not a provocation. You know that.
Okay.
So everyone's shy in here. There's haven't gotten any more questions. We have time for one more question. So if someone would like to take themselves off of mute or put the question in the chat, I will ask it.
While they're thinking, let me just plug a couple of things we've got coming up. May 11th and 12th is our National Advocacy Conference, and we have our state and local groups get together. I forget when, probably on the 11th. As a part of that, we'd love for as many of you as possible to participate, get to know your other state associations, and have your voices heard on the Hill. We're going to have a really good lineup of important Capitol Hill types for that. And then something I'm personally really excited about is we've announced that our annual convention will be in person in San Diego, October 17th to 20th. Registration is now open. We are hearing from all sorts of people that they're dying to get back out live and in the flesh. And while I think MBA does it better than anybody, I'm completely sick of virtual events, as I'm sure a lot of you are, and can't wait to be in person in San Diego in October. Hope to see as many of you as possible there.
Sounds good. San Diego. Nice.
No matter the time of year, San Diego's nice. Yeah.
No question. Well, I'll do this one last question. So what Bob could we do to help you, to help the MBA, number one, and then number two, to just help the industry in general to remain healthy? Sure.
Well, I mean, I think a couple of things. One is that I think we all need to tell our stories a little more often, a little better. As the new administration comes in and you hear some of the rhetoric from the Bureau, and, there are a lot of Elizabeth Warren acolytes that are going to be running this place. And you get the old, servicers are trying to screw the customer. And you get some of the, I think people have long memories from the financial crisis, and we did not cover ourselves with glory during that. Let's face it, we were overwhelmed on the servicing side, completely overmatched. And, a lot of people tried really hard to get all the documents they needed for a modification or whatever. And, I lost the fax, and all the story. And it was lousy back then. But this is not 2009. I think it's a story we really need to get out there. And our servicers, in the span of about 4 weeks in March and April, put over 4.75 million people into forbearance in the span of 4 weeks. And sure, there were a couple bumps along the way. Well, it was at the same time they were going to a completely remote work environment. I mean, it's really remarkable. And so I've had a private conversation with the acting director over there, say, hey, when you say stupid shit like that, of course, I didn't say it this bluntly, maybe put in a little bit about how great we've done to avoid anybody losing their homes and to take advantage of the forbearance. And now how well we're doing getting people out of forbearance. We're down to, I think it's 2.3 million. And a very high percentage of the exits are what we call good exits, which means people either pay it back or they defer it or they get a mod or whatever, but they're staying in their homes. And the acting director did say, look, we're going to judge your members on outcomes. And if people stay in their homes, we're not going to attack them for compliance sake, which was good to hear. I don't know why he'll tell me that privately and not. Well, I do know because he's got to satisfy his left flank politically. But anyway, so I think not being shy, being proud of what this industry does and telling the story, which you can do with your elected representatives as well, is really important. And the other thing I'll self-servingly say is that if you are a member of the Maryland Association, but you're not a member of the mothership, we'd love to have you on board, and you can make your voice heard so much more effectively through the Mortgage Action Alliance and through MORPAC, which really is the coin of the realm in Washington, and would really welcome everybody's active participation in that.
It's awesome. Thank you. Thank you. So we have one last comment, but before we get that comment, I wanted to thank all, the participants today. So Frank, Dana, thank you so much for the welcome. I wanted to thank Colleen, you as well, for, giving us more information about the membership benefits and such. And then also Tim, the legislative update was much needed. And obviously, Bob, you've been very helpful and giving us some great insights and just questions that we've all likely been talking to each other about and, sort of dying to ask someone. So you hit it, and we appreciate that. But before we close, Rich Green has a comment, and then what we'll do is we'll just let you go about the rest of your evening, and we'll all part ways. But Rich, if you wanted to unmute yourself, go ahead and do so. Say this comment, and then we'll close out the meeting for today.
I do. Bob, I just wanted to just pass this along, how much we at the MMBVA value our relationship with the MBA. You guys in particular, Coop and Kobe, have just been a tremendous asset to our legislative efforts, and oftentimes participate in our weekly Zoom legislative calls. And they've just given us tremendous support, really not just this year with Zoom, but through the years. Attended our legislative dinners and things like that. And it's gone a long way and helped the Maryland MMBBA and Metro Washington MBA. So I wanted to just say thank you for that.
Well, thanks for mentioning that, Rich. We're really proud to have Coop and Kobe and their team that focuses exclusively on state and local matters. And in fact, they do so on the multifamily commercial side too. So it's a pretty broad portfolio. And we're really happy I think it's maybe one of the lesser known parts about MBA, because you think we're in Washington, we think about federal things, but we do a whole lot on that side. And I'm so glad that they're being effective on your behalf, Rich.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So listen, everybody, we're going to run, and this was a great event. Bob, again, thank you for your time. And Colleen, I think, did you want to say something, Colleen? I see.
No. I just appreciate it. I will say one thing though, Bob. I really didn't expect it to be so hard to get a hold of you. So I need you to open up that LinkedIn with a key to direct contact or something, because I kept promising that I was going to try to get you for this Zoom, and then a week would go by, and the second week, and I was like, Amanda, I'm going to have to look for somebody else. But I got you. But I might need to have your phone number or something.
All right. Well, I've got a secret for you.
Okay.
It's the most complex email address in the industry, bob@mba.org. And I
got it now.
Not com.org, bob@mba.org.
And I big time appreciate you being here for us today to kind of, I think it makes everybody just feel a little better, if nothing else. We're kind of all in this together. So thank you, sir. And thank you, everybody else, for being on the call. And thank you, Sean, for being the man. You're awesome.
Bob's busy. He's been out there telling stories. Everybody heard that. Just tell your story.
Yeah.
Tell your story, guys.
There you
Have
go.
a great evening, everybody.
All right. Have a great.
Bye,
Yeah.
guys. Thank you.
So long.